So now we will go ahead and begin our session on digital evidence management, or for the longer title, meeting the challenges of managing digital media evidence, working with prosecutors using analytics and redaction tool. As a reminder, points of view or opinions expressed by the presenters here today and in all the sessions associated with body-worn camera, training and technical assistance national meeting do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. Joining us today, we have Dr. Craig Uchida, who is a body-worn camera training and technical assistant senior advisor and the president of Justice and Security Strategies. We also have Michelle Stern from Fort Lauderdale, Florida Police Department, Kalpes Chotai from the State Attorney's Office of Broward County, Florida, and Damon Mosler, Deputy District Attorney for San Diego County, and also body-worn camera training and technical assistance subject matter expert. Thank you all for your time and your participation in this panel. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Dr. Uchida.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Welcome, everyone. This is a panel on digital evidence management. I think we've got a great panel today, frankly. You're going to hear from Michelle Stern, who's with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. She's had a number of years of experience as a police officer and is now serving as a civilian, assisting with the body-worn camera program in Fort Lauderdale. Actually, why don't we go to the next slide, Jessica? We also have Cal Chotai. Cal is the digital evidence unit supervisor. He's a native Floridian. He's gone to school in Tampa and the University of Miami Law School, I believe. And as I mentioned, is an expert in this area, as is Damon Mosler. Damon is with us from San Diego. He's one of our SMEs and one of our experts on body-worn cameras. And he's got expertise not only in San Diego County, but he's been working with sites across the country on digital evidence management and is here to lend his expertise to us. Next slide, please. Part of what we'll talk about, and part of what I'll do is talk about the definition of digital evidence management, talk briefly about a pilot project we're working on with a number of sites, and also talk about video analytics and redaction. I know that's an important issue for people, and we thought we'd put out a little bit of information about that as well. And then Michelle and Cal will talk about digital evidence management and the issues they have within Fort Lauderdale and Broward County in dealing with body-worn camera footage. Damon will talk about, oh dear, excuse me, I'm sorry. Damon will talk about digital evidence management in San Diego County and the work he's been doing over the last 5 years with the county and his office. Next slide, please. So what is digital evidence management? Next slide. What we've done is just taken a definition from the National Institute of Justice about digital evidence. And it's obviously a very broad topic. It's about information and data and the value to investigators and investigation. And obviously that's stored on some kind of electronic device. It could be a computer, cell phone, it could be video footage, it could be body-worn camera footage, but it also can be internet communications, social media types of things as well. For us, clearly, we're talking about body-worn camera video and the importance of handling footage for evidentiary purposes, but also for internal administrative purposes. Next slide, please. So part of what we're doing, oh yes, so we have some pop-ups here. And as part of our pop-ups, I would like you to answer these kinds of questions. So the first one is, does your agency keep track of the number of body-worn camera videos recorded by officers on a daily, monthly, or quarterly basis? So if you can answer that question, that would be great. What I'll do, I'll continue to talk until we have answers from you all. And when we have those answers, I'll come back to that. Our project right now is to examine how footage is used in 5 jurisdictions. So we're looking at LA, we're looking at Rochester, Harris County in Texas, Phoenix and Glendale in Arizona, and Fort Lauderdale and Broward County in Florida. We're trying to determine the number of videos at each stage of a different process, and we're trying to determine the issues and challenges as well. And so that's part of what we're involved in. Okay, so 55% of you say that you do keep track of those numbers, and 45% say no. Okay, that's interesting. I was hoping it would be more yeses, but that's okay. Next slide, please. So this is a flow chart that we've put together about how and in what way body-worn camera footage runs through a police agency and also through the criminal justice process. And obviously it starts when there's an incident and starts when the camera is activated by a patrol officer or other officers who you may have assigned to a camera. It's uploaded to a server, whether it's to the cloud or a server in your agency. That's what happens. Depending on your agency, you may be doing compliance checks. You may be looking at video to see whether officers are doing things appropriately or not. You may be looking at them randomly. You may be looking at them very specifically. You may also be using the footage for training purposes and other reasons that you find important. At the next phase, you are using it for, I think, arrest purposes, and detectives and others are perhaps reviewing the video to see how useful that video is for an arrest. And if an arrest is made, then it will go through the process. So here's the second question we have. Does your agency use BWC footage routinely for investigative purposes, for investigations? So as you answer that question, I'll continue to talk about the flow of video. But what also happens with the prosecutors, and Cal and Damon will talk about this more, but there's discovery, there's defense, there's presentation in the courtroom. What happens with all of that? In some cases, prosecutors will also look at critical incidents and be involved in critical incidents. As in LA, and I know in San Diego and elsewhere, critical incidents like use of force, officer-involved shootings, etc., are important, and they do review those. Similarly, internally within a police department, as I talked earlier in the previous session, footage is used extensively and to determine what happened and why. And so next slide. And then we have answers here. Okay, so yes, 83% of you say yes, your department or agency uses body-worn camera footage routinely for investigations. 17% do not. Okay, well, thank you. So the next area I want to just briefly talk about are video analytics and redaction. Why it's important, what goes on with it, what kind of storage issues you have, what's important to you, and are there ways right now to assist you in what you're doing? Next slide, please. So right now, you all are accumulating a lot of video footage. In LA, we've estimated that there are about 7 million videos a year, 15,000 a day that the 10,000 officers are accumulating. And while I know your departments are not that large, you're still collecting and having to deal with a large number of videos. How well do you categorize? How well can you tag that? And our experts will talk a bit about this later on. Do you have redaction capabilities? Are you able to edit things? How long does it take you to do that? Is there software that's compatible for video analytics? And there are other issues clearly about storage and search capacity. Storage in particular is extremely important because you may have to purge things and you may only have a limited amount of space. So how do you make decisions about that? Next slide, please. Part of what we're doing right now is re-examining a market survey that NIJ conducted in 2016. And we're just doing a preliminary look at the market survey. And what NIJ did, and they published a 400-page document that is available and we can make available to you about all of the vendors that were selling body-worn cameras back in 2016 and what they did with those. We decided to look at these again to see whether, one, vendors are still active, and two, whether and in what form they're actually providing and hoping to provide different analytic tools to help you. We found that there are currently 26 vendors that are still active out of the 37, and the 26 vendors are actually selling 36 body-worn camera types. Next slide, please. We also found that most of the 2020 devices do offer tagging abilities. We're not arguing for or against any particular vendor on this, but you do want to know, okay, well, what does that mean in terms of their abilities to tag? How good is the redaction software that's being provided? And are third parties able to look at the video, and in what way? Is it in the cloud? Do you still have to cut DVDs or CDs? I think a lot of that's up to you with respect to this. Very few vendors mentioned any type of synchronization with digital in-car video. And no one as of yet has mentioned audio to text, although that is a coming kind of software that vendors are going to be making available, I think in the next 6 months or even sooner. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're now going to turn to how digital evidence management affects people in Broward County. We'll hear from Michelle Stern talking about Fort Lauderdale. We'll also hear from Cal. As you can see on this map, we're talking about South Florida. The little triangle there represents Fort Lauderdale, and the lighter blue represents Broward County. Next slide, please. And I'm going to now turn it over to Michelle. Go ahead.
So even though we look like a little orange triangle, we are actually a very large city. We have almost 172,000 in our population, and we run about 535 sworn officers. We're 33 square miles, but we have a very diverse community, and we service a lot of different demographics in our community. So Fort Lauderdale thought it was very important, and I agree that we have transparency in our agency, and part of doing that is adopting a body-worn camera program. So we adopted our program in December of 2018. Each of our officers have 2 cameras, so we have about 1,100 cameras. And the beginning of this month, we had just under 400,000. We've exceeded the 400,000 mark of active retained videos. So what I mean by that is we have our system set up so that if something can be purged, it is purged automatically. So a lot of them have already been purged out of the system. The retention that we set for our purging is correlated with the public records laws. So we used the public records laws in the state of Florida and what's required for retention, and we apply that to all of our retention categories in our system so that the officers can tag that automatically. Next slide. We have a poll. Does your agency receive requests for BWC footage from the public Media or through Freedom of Information Act. So if you guys can answer that for me, please, we'll get the results. And while you're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about our regional group that we have created in Broward County. We actually have Dade County, Palm Beach County, and even a little north of Palm Beach County that sometimes come and attend our meetings. Our group is comprised of agencies that are either using or considering the use of body-worn camera. We have members of the state attorney's office that come, members from different agencies. Really anyone who's dealing with any of this type of digital evidence is invited to our group meetings. We share information with one another as issues arise. We discuss current issues, resolutions maybe that we've had. You know, we have an issue come up where none of us have ever dealt with it before. It's something that we openly discuss, and that sharing of information and that networking group that we have created has been really instrumental to the success of all of our programs in our area. So if you don't have a group like that in your area, you may want to consider getting with some of the other agencies and formulating something like that. We had an issue in Broward where evidence was shared to the defense attorney through the discovery process. It wasn't our evidence, it was another agency in Broward County. The state attorney shared it through the discovery process, and the defense attorney came back to the assistant state attorney and notified them that the victim's confidential location was given away because of the mapping that was showing up on the videos. They were automatically tagging with a GPS coordinate, and the GPS coordinate was showing the women in distress secret house location, which could have been very dangerous. So we were fortunate that the defense attorney was kind enough to share that information with us. And as a result of that, we have all turned off that GPS location on all of our systems so that that doesn't get shared in error to any of the defense. Next slide. So public records. That's a sticky subject. It's going to vary state to state, depending on your state laws. One thing I will share with you, and this is going to apply to everyone, you may not have requests in the beginning, but that can change in a second. You can have one critical incident that could lead to an abundance of public records requests that will make your head spin. So be prepared for the possibility, even if it's slow in the beginning, you may get a gradual uptick with that as citizens and residents find out that you do have the cameras. But as more and more people discover that, your public records requests are going to increase tremendously. Some of the things that you need to consider when you're handling public records: is it releasable? That's going to vary depending on your state laws. Every state is very different. Florida is very open, and we release quite a bit. Some of it does get redacted, but it's still probably going to be releasable. Does it require redaction? And if it does, do you have to cite the reason why you're making that redaction? In Florida, we do. So we have to cite a statutory exemption if we're making a redaction to a piece of evidence to let the individual receiving that evidence know why it was redacted. And then what are the costs? These requests are extremely time consuming and very labor intensive. So who's going to pay for that? In Florida, we're permitted to charge the requester reasonable fees for that, and we do that. And I do recommend, after experience, getting payment upfront. I've worked on countless hours of video only to have it sit where nobody ever paid us. So I would recommend at least getting a portion of your payment upfront so that you know that the requester's committed to following through with that request. And then how are you going to provide, how are you going to furnish your requester with that information? Is it going to be a digital link through the system that you use with your vendor? Is it going to be put onto a DVD? Are you going to have to put it onto a USB? And then the cost and time that's involved with all of that as well. I'm in a fortunate situation where the vendor that we use, we're able to just send out a digital link, and that's how I send my information to all of my requesters. Next slide. One of the other more time-consuming events that I find on the day-to-day, once you have a program up and running, is corrections that may be required to metadata. So on a daily basis, I send notifications to officers that forget to add their case number and retention category. We tried the auto tagging in Broward. It doesn't work very well because we're on a regional dispatch system. So it got a little dicey, and we decided to have the officers do the tagging themselves. But that's also going to require me to have to go in, search everything, make sure that everything's tagged properly, and send out notifications if they need correcting. We also run into, from time to time, this is something else to consider as you're starting a program. There may be one video, but it may have multiple case numbers associated with it. So that's something we're still working through. We're trying to find the best resolution for that issue. We usually just let our state attorney's office know that there may be multiple case numbers associated with that one particular piece of evidence that's under only the one case number that we're able to tag it with. And then the retention categories, like I had stated before, we've matched those up with our public state records laws, and that we find that that works very well. It helps. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Cal.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying this wonderful conference. I know it's been really informative over the past few days. Just wanted to briefly touch on what Michelle spoke about, referencing the regional work group that we have, and it's really important to have one of those. You know, I can't stress the benefit of that. I know Michelle went over an example real quick, but you know, another example was we had an occasion where a defense attorney filed a motion related to a breathalyzer test. We have intoxilizer equipment that a lot of our officers have in the field, and so the concern was that the body-worn camera was causing RF interference, radio frequency interference, with the intoxilizer equipment, resulting in improper numbers. So that was actually an issue that we litigated out, and we basically, through that litigation process, were able to come up with a recommendation to our partner agencies, to our law enforcement partners, to advise them to stop recording when they're administering an intoxilizer test. So for those agencies, I believe Fort Lauderdale is one of them, they actually have mobile intoxilizer units. And with those particular scenes, we have a backup officer who will record the actual interaction with the officer versus the defendant or subject, while the administering officer turns off his body-worn camera. This is just to prevent any kind of unknowns related to RF interference. So again, that's definitely a benefit of having the regional work group, and I advise strongly to working to getting into one. So Broward County has approximately 2 million civilians, population of 2 million, and my office has about 525 employees. Our law enforcement partners are comprised of 16 different municipalities, 16 different city agencies, and 16 sheriff's office districts. And so that becomes important when it relates to digital evidence management, where you have multiple officers from different agencies responding, or you have assistance from other agencies. And we'll get into that a little bit more in one of the future slides. Next slide, please. So here's a brief, or just a quick map of Broward County. Shows all of our municipalities, the different sheriff's office districts as well. Here's a poll question. Does your agency share BWC video with nearby jurisdictions when applicable? This kind of ties into what I was referring to previously, where you have pursuits that enter different jurisdictions, or you have, you know, different counties coming into your county that are recording body-worn camera to help out with the scene. Do you share video across jurisdictions or across counties when it relates to body-worn camera with the partner agency and the state attorney's office for that district? So go ahead and move on. Go ahead, next slide, thank you. So countywide, this is as of August 4th, so the information is a little outdated, but countywide we had 848,400 pieces of individual evidence that were within 80,000 cases. And of course that number has gone up a lot since then. But so the state attorney's office we're currently not deleting anything. So this is an aggregate from 2012 when we first started, or 2016 when we first started our body-worn camera program. Next slide. Okay, so here's some poll results. So it looks like 70% actually are sharing with other nearby jurisdictions and 30% are not. I'd be interested to know how the 30% who are not sharing are able to effectively communicate that information over to the state attorney's office. So we've got multi-agency response Broward County, like I said, we do have local jurisdictions. We do have the county jurisdiction, the county sheriff's office, along with statewide agencies and tribal law enforcement agencies. I know there was a question from one of our attendees here. Desiree is asking about tribal agencies. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with tribal agencies, but our tribal agencies do actually provide body-worn camera video with, to the state attorney's office. So they do provide all their body-worn camera video, and if they happen to have a DUI that occurred in their region, then they'll use the sheriff's office for their breathalyzer, for their toxicological testing, or for their if they don't do field testing, they'll take them down to the BAT center for BAT exercises. So we do have, like I said, multiple jurisdictions, and it's very important to work with your law enforcement partners in your county, in your circuit, in your jurisdiction to know how that works. With local jurisdictions, it's a little bit easier, but when you've got statewide agencies and you've got tribal law enforcement agencies, it's important for them to know how procedures vary from county to county, because a lot of these officers do traverse the entire state. So in Florida, we have, Florida Highway Patrol, we've got Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and then, like I said, we do have the tribal agencies that do cover, from northern Florida down to central Florida down to South Florida. So they do traverse the whole state. So it's important for them to be trained, for them to know the concerns that your prosecution has, if they are sharing with the other law enforcement partners what that procedure is. So please get with your tribal agencies or with your statewide agencies to figure that out. Okay, here's a poll question for the next slide. I wanted to know if any of your circuits are you currently burning CDs? And if you are, is it for courtroom presentation, for prosecutor's review, or is it to actually enter into evidence? So if you would please go ahead and just vote on whether or not you're currently burning discs. I would appreciate that. Next slide, please. So I know Michelle spoke a little bit on redaction, and redaction is a big issue for the state attorney's office in Broward County as well. It's a very time-consuming process, as many of you, I'm sure, are already aware of. And, in Florida, we recently had Marcy's Law, which was passed, and that's still a gray area where we're still trying to figure out the best practice for Marcy's Law. So I caution you, and I advise all of you to get with your public records prosecutors, or get with your public records, your counsel, in-house counsels with regards to public records. As in, the state of Florida, Florida is a very open discovery state, and you want to make sure that what's going out is pursuant to a public records request is not something that hasn't gone out in discovery. So you want to make sure that discovery was sent out to the defense attorney first. We actually have occasions where we have requests come in for body-worn camera, and we're figuring out ways and unique ways to try and fulfill those requests. And fortunately, our vendor does allow for sharing of a unique download link to the recipient, so we're not having to burn discs for that purpose. But the actual redaction process of doing that, it takes just an incredible amount of time. And I know Damon, I'm sorry, not Damon. I know Craig has spoken a little bit about digital in-car video synchronization, and if vendors were to provide that, it would really reduce a lot of time that we have to spend on getting videos synchronized for courtroom presentation. So I know that's a big ask, from the prosecution side. Another topic I want to touch on briefly, going back to the last slide, was that when you have body-worn camera from a municipality, from a city district that also utilize the sheriff's office BAT facility, we're going to have two different offense report numbers. We're going to have two different video sets contained from those different agencies. So it's important for my office, for my prosecutors to know that they've got body-worn camera under one offense report number, under one ID number, and then you'll have the sobriety testing and the toxicology. The toxicology is not recorded, but you'll have the sobriety test done under a different offense report number, ID number. So it's important for your prosecutors to also understand that nuance and not miss any videos when they're reviewing body-worn camera or sobriety videos for purposes of filing or trial. So just understanding that is very important. And as I said, the public records laws are always evolving, so it's important to have continuous training. And I definitely advise your office to have quarterly or even semi-annually training, just to kind of update and refresh your prosecutors on what changes have come about in recent months regarding public records laws. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the biggest issues that we have is coordinating with defense attorneys and courts of getting the video footage over to them. And we're very fortunate that we have two different vendors that we currently use in Broward County. The different departments have chosen to use different vendors for their body camera footage. So State Attorney's Office actually receives video using 2 different systems, and our prosecutors need to know which system to go into depending on which agency responded. And fortunately, both systems do have a mechanism where we can share download links to defense attorneys. One of the bigger issues that we do have, and I'm sure you have in your circuits as well, are proprietary file formats. And this particularly comes into play when you have surveillance videos. I know that there's a big push. I know a lot of vendors are trying to accommodate for this concern, but we do have issues with proprietary video formats where we're going to have to basically download the videos, convert them to a playable format, and then re-upload them back into our digital evidence management system so the prosecutor can review it. And so when it goes out to defense, there's no motions to compel because defense says, hey, I couldn't look at the video. So that's very important, and I hope that vendors really get on the ball with the proprietary file format playability on their systems. We also have the ability using our system to send a upload link, so we can email or text an upload link to a civilian and say, hey, look, if you have any additional video files or photos or anything you want to send to the State Attorney's Office, please use this link and upload it to us. And it's really important because oftentimes you'll be in pretrial, you'll be in a deposition, something will come up and you don't have that in your file. You don't have any indication that there was any kind of Ring video doorbell, or if there was any other photos that were taken on scene, and you obviously want that information. So we have the ability to send an upload link to civilians to get that over to us. So that really helps us a lot. The biggest downfall that we have in Broward County is that obviously for courts, we still need to burn discs. So, and I'm hoping that divide is kind of bridged over the next year or so, that courts start to accept digital download links, as for the official record, but fortunately don't see that happening anytime soon. Next slide, please. Okay, so as a result of body-worn camera and digital evidence in general, we've noticed that cases are resolving a lot more frequently. We're having a lot of cases go into diversion. We're basically saving a lot of time in depositions and not having to expend as many resources with the filing process and litigation and trying the actual case. So digital evidence management in Broward County has been a big relief as far as staffing goes in one aspect, but the other aspect of it is that our prosecutors are tasked with watching many, many, many hours of video now when they could have filed the case previously within minutes. So just a quick example of that downfall is that on driving while license suspended case, any prosecutor, any filing prosecutor could file that case within 20 or 30 minutes. Now you have videos of the deputy or officer initiating the stop, and you'll have the hook and tow, and you'll have just a lot of time that video is recorded where the prosecutor needs to watch it in the event that there's any kind of statement that was or omission that was made by the defendant or subject in that case, or admission made in that case. I'm sorry. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Cal and Michelle. We're going to turn now to Damon Mosler, who will talk about San Diego County. Go ahead, Damon.
Hi, thank you, Craig, and thank you everybody for attending the meeting. In San Diego, we have 3,200 sworn police officers, and they all have cameras. It spans 11 departments. There's one more department that's going to deploy in the near future. As you can see, we have a population of over 3 million people and quite a large jurisdiction in terms of land mass. When we first started getting body-worn camera videos in 2014, our local agency burnt discs and gave them to us. Over time, that has changed. And as you can see, last year we had 235,000 videos to both ourselves and our city attorney's office. In the county of San Diego, we handle all felony cases and the misdemeanor cases in the outlying areas. But in the city of San Diego, the city attorney's office handles those cases. Combined, we have 350 prosecutors, and the data reflected here shows all the videos that we get as a collective prosecution unit. If you can go to the next slide, please. As you can imagine, every single case now submitted to either prosecutor's office in San Diego County does involve digital evidence. It will have some form of video associated with it, even if it wasn't the aha moment of catching the individual in the act. There's at least video of them being arrested or interviews of the civilian witnesses. What that means is that in every criminal case that we file and the city attorney files anywhere in our county, we're going to have to process some form of digital evidence. One of the ways that we've handled this and in a unique setting is in our juvenile division. And some of that is because of the unique nature of juvenile cases. We can go to the next slide, please. This model of what we've done, and they call this GELS, for the juvenile system is a form of digital evidence management that is quite successful. Cases are submitted by law enforcement electronically to the probation department, because in our juvenile setting in California, the probation department controls the courts initially. A lot of cases may not make it all the way to the DA's office or to the judge. They'll make it to the probation department to make a decision about. So the probation department gets these cases sent to them electronically, and the data fields in law enforcement reports help populate some of the data fields that they need for the probation reports. In turn, we will have access to cases that get referred to the DA's office, and the same thing will happen. Our initial case fields, or our case management fields, will be populated with the biographical data of both the arresting officer and the minor involved, and/or witnesses as well. Once we make a decision to file, we can do so electronically, and we provide that same data to the courts, and also to the defense. We're able to provide this electronically. And we all have virtual files, and we don't need to have physical files in our juvenile setting. We've been doing this for the past 4 or 5 years. The body cameras didn't really play a role in this part of the process. This was developed by somebody who had a unique insight and saw how many times data was being entered by numerous entities, whether it be a police department, the DA's office, the court, or probation. And collectively, because it's a smaller system with a smaller number of players involved, we were able to get this agreement. And it's an ongoing type of system that is very viable. And I highly recommend it if it's something that your jurisdiction is amenable to. I looked at what we were getting by way of body camera videos, and as it started to increase, as an opportunity to try to nudge the system into a more vibrant form of evidence management, where we have things digitalized and the various fields in the reports get populated digitally. We don't have to do multiple manual entries. Unfortunately, we don't have that with our adult system, and we have a little bit more limited buy-in. But if we go to the next slide, we are constantly struggling with how to get our videos to the defense. And we know that the platforms that the law enforcement uses, and we're fortunate in San Diego that we have one platform across the board now, mostly. There's one other agency that's not. So all the videos come the same way, and we're able to discover them electronically. Prior to getting the videos and being in the body camera business, we were actually doing electronic discovery. We had started that in 2013 and 14, and we were able to provide our police reports all to the defense bar and to the public defender's office electronically. Now, unfortunately, we received those reports in a written fashion. Law enforcement prints those out, brings them to us, and we scan them in. As a result of the body cameras, we started to develop a program where we could import the data and import the reports, but it took a long time. And to be honest, there was no incentive to get that done until we got into the COVID era. And now we are seeing our IT department and our local sheriff's IT department are using the record management system of law enforcement to import data into our case management system, filling all the fields that we manage in terms of the biographical information of all the people involved in the case. And in turn, we are ingesting reports. So we started a pilot on that 3 years after we wanted to, which is unfortunate, but we are able to do that now in one jurisdiction in our community, and we were hoping to spread it throughout the rest of this year. So I look at the videos, and particularly with this remote type of processing that we're all doing, as an opportunity to get out of paper and to actually effectively manage all the digital evidence that comes in a strong fashion. Because we know across the board in virtually every police agency right now, there's some form of digital evidence that's being processed by them, not just body camera, but their reports. And we as prosecutors should be able to pull those in to us and make sure we have that. There are jurisdictions that I'm working with in other parts of the country that are trying to do that. And if we go to the next slide, one of the things we want to do is make sure that we have everything. And so if you are developing a system where data and reports are coming to you, you need to develop a system that has a way to gauge that you got everything. What are the critical reports that you have? What is missing? Is there a way to track what's missing? Because we know as prosecutors, I know Cal will say this too, is that if we are missing something, we're going to get in trouble in court. We're going to have a case jeopardized. If videos go missing because they weren't tagged properly or associated with the case, we can have a case dismissed. If we have reports that are missing, cases can get delayed. Most laws throughout the country say that we're held to have everything the law enforcement has, but if we don't get it and we don't know we didn't get it, that can create a problem. We had one very significant case in San Diego involving a very critical use of force where some videos were miscategorized and did not make it to us. You know, when you have those types of incidents, you have many officers arrive. If an officer gets shot, you'll have 30 to 40 officers, if not 100, arrive on the scene, and they may not all get captured as to that event. So one little caveat or one little takeaway for larger jurisdictions, but even smaller ones, is that if you have that type of situation, have one person not associated with the direct investigation be responsible for making sure they have every video associated with it, that every camera gets it labeled correctly, and all the videos get downloaded properly, and you isolate that so you have that available. It didn't jeopardize the case that we had because we were able to establish those videos were not relevant or the officers didn't have an integral part on this. But imagine if that had not been the case, how devastating that would be to have a case where an officer was shot jeopardized as a result of missing evidence. So as we move into a more digital fashion with processing of evidence, we got to make sure that we're getting it all, and we have to have safeguards in place to ensure that. The other thing that we're looking at, and I think Cal touched on this too, is the courts. And if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. Is what to do with videos in court. And the courtrooms are usually our slowest adopter of technology and require a different way of doing things. So we too are burning discs, having to do redactions before we get into court with videos if we are redacting, and that can be problematic. I am seeing some hope with respect to the way courtrooms are working now. I think we're seeing judges more willing to do remote technology and allow witnesses to testify from afar, which is a good thing. We in San Diego are filing things electronically in terms of search warrants. That was a result actually, and again, it's always good to take advantage of things that change and look forward to it. Several years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, the Supreme Court made it that we would have to get search warrants for DUI refusals. And that means judges had to get woken up, and we had 10 to 20 a day coming in that we had to do that. And to get transcripts of the audio files that we would do in terms of getting telephonic search warrants was costing the judges a lot of time. So we were able to leverage that and allow them to do it electronically, where we submit a 1 or 2 page document and they can process it. Their staff doesn't have to do it. So as a result of something that occurred that was kind of a negative, we were able to turn that into more of a positive in terms of how the courts are looking at digital evidence or processing internally and being willing to do that. So I encourage you to try to use the body camera technology to nudge your courts into the right direction. And it does require your prosecutors, since I know mostly we have law enforcement on this call, to have your prosecutors on board and make sure that they know what the technology is. The representatives from Broward and Fort Lauderdale described quarterly meetings. We do that as well, and that's really helpful to make sure that we're all on the same page, that for me as a prosecutor, that law enforcement is sensitive to my needs of getting all the evidence, labeling things correctly, making sure things don't fall between the cracks, and that we in turn improve outcomes and where necessary provide training for law enforcement so they get better outcomes on their videos, whether it be marking a video in a critical spot to make it easier for us to find, to just doing narration or getting good evidence on it and giving them feedback. So I look at this as a unique time, and I know that a lot of the work that Craig and his team are doing in terms of understanding digital evidence management can be leveraged through both law enforcement and the DA's office to improve our overall outcomes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Craig, and if we have any questions.
Thank you all. And here's our contact information, by the way, for those of you in the audience who want to contact us directly about anything you may want to know more about, or any other topics too. We do have a couple of questions. One question I have, and I think this might be of interest to the audience too, is the personnel and time that all of this takes. I know, Michelle, you mentioned how much time you invest, and you're a full-time person. If you could talk briefly, Michelle, about how many people you actually need, maybe, or how many you have, and how that works, and also what the qualifications are, perhaps, for people who do your job and who you would like to have work with you.
So I think when Fort Lauderdale initially undertook this huge monumental event of diving into the body camera world, I don't think any of us could have anticipated the amount of evidence, digital evidence that has to be managed. And through COVID, we've also now taken on the responsibility of sending all of our case files electronically. So with all of these time-consuming events, I know it's hard to believe, but it's me and my wonderful assistant who is worth the weight of gold to me. We are both retired law enforcement. I believe that that's a huge advantage when filling these positions. You have someone with analytical, critical thinking skills that's able to piece these pieces of evidence together to figure out what goes where and why that goes here, and delve into a report and see what did the officer do. So even if the individual that's going to be working in your program doesn't have a police background, maybe a dispatcher or someone who was a service aide, someone who's familiar with radio, all the activities that go on the road. I know the dispatchers aren't on the road, but they hear it a lot. It's very, very beneficial. Ethics and integrity are two of probably the most important things when you're dealing with a program like this. There's so much confidential video that comes through our hands on a daily basis. You want to just make sure that you have someone who's taking that, handling that with integrity. And then attention to detail and problem solving. There's things that pop up almost on a weekly basis where we look at each other and say, well, we haven't dealt with this, but you know what, we're going to figure it out. And we do. We have a great support from our chain of command and our chief. They love this program and they give us all the backing that we need to do our jobs. We are going to be adding one new position, so there will be 3 of us. So for a 535 officer agency, just to give agencies ideas about how much staffing you would need. I do know smaller agencies in our area that work with less people, but we have found that with our efficiency, we're able to get by with that.
And before we move on, Cal, how many people do you have in your unit in your office?
So I have, there's 3 full-time employees and 1 contractor employee that kind of floats between regular IT responsibilities and digital evidence management related responsibilities. Where we see the biggest obstacle and the biggest challenge with timing is, of course, redactions. And I know nowadays more and more cases, pretty much a good percentage of our cases that were stops were initiated by patrol. We have CJIS protected data on screen where you've got, so in the state of Florida, we have something called DAVID, which is a driver and vehicle information database on screen, and that's CJIS protected. That needs to be redacted prior to release or for trial. So that process alone takes a monumental amount of time. It's just a monumental task, and I can't even stress how appreciative I am for the team that we have that they're able to pull together. But we've got pretty much, obviously every single case in Broward County goes through our office with the exception of your city attorneys, and so we have the daunting task of making sure everything is redacted and ready in a timely manner for trial and for court purposes. So staffing is definitely a big concern for us, and if you have the ability to, I'd definitely recommend getting individuals who are tech savvy and understand the legal process, understand the process of a case from filing to disposition. And I think understanding that and working well with your law enforcement partners is key. I've got a great relationship with Michelle. I call Michelle probably 10 times a day with random issues, and she doesn't mind. And you have to form that relationship with your law enforcement partners to have a good outcome.
Okay, Damon, did you want to?
Sure. We have not increased staffing at all.
Okay.
And some of that was my doing because I wanted to have the technology work for us, hopefully improve efficiencies. And I made some friends, I'm sure, in my office as a result of that. But we don't redact all of our videos before we put them out for discovery. We use our protective order system. So vast majority of the cases, we don't actually have to redact or even go eyes on for common run-of-the-mill type reactive cases. Our specialized units do more work in redaction, and we do have a technical services division that does trial redaction, but we have not increased staffing for that. And we've managed to survive. I do think some people were unhappy in the long run, the short run.
Okay, and we have 2 questions from the audience. One is on redaction. the other's on retention. Just in terms of the numbers or the percentage of videos that you get, what percent do you redact? So Michelle, do you have a sense of that in terms of the number of videos that you have? How many of those would you have to redact? And then how long does it take you to do that?
Well, state law is going to dictate what actually would need to be redacted out of videos.
Okay.
So that's going to vary state to state. In the state of Florida, what I end up redacting, there's probably about 80% of the videos that I touch in a public records request that's going to require a redaction. Even if it's just something as simple as redacting out the officer's computer, because there may be confidential NCIC, FCIC, CJIS type information on there that is confidential that we cannot release. We do not redact anything that we send to our state attorney. We're only doing redaction for public records requests. Everything that goes to the state attorney's office goes raw and unredacted, and the state attorney typically will share it in the same manner to the defense. I spend a good majority of my day doing review and redaction for public records requests. We have gotten unbelievably busy with all the civil protests and everything that's going on. So I spend on average about 3 to 4 hours a day just working on review and redaction of public records.
Okay. Cal?
Yeah, so just a response to that question, real. Okay, I'm unmuted. I want to make sure I was unmuted there. And so in response to that question, I would probably say 30 to 40% of our cases are redacted prior to trial. And so it really varies. It's hard to really put put empirical data on that, but it's probably right in the 40 to 45% range, honestly. It's just, you have a lot of your county court cases, a lot of your criminal traffic stuff that will go through without needing any kind of redaction. With the exception of, you have those where you've got CJIS information on a MDT inside a patrol car. That's the exception, obviously, but you do have more of the specialized units are where the redactions come into play. On Damon said that that's the case in his office as well. We see most of our redactions come from domestic violence, sexual battery, and homicide. It's just the nature of the cases require additional redactions. So I say the bulk of it is from there, and right around 45%.
Okay. Damon?
Initially, it was quite high. It's gone down, pretty much looking only for trial and the few specialized divisions. And I really can gauge percentage. Our DAs do a lot of the raw redaction because we have the access to the redaction software from the vendor, and that helps
Okay.
really
And
farm it
that
out
was-
until it's finalized for trial.
And that was part of the question too, was whether you use an integrated redaction program or you have supplemental redaction programs. Do you use the software that's part of your body worn cameras, or you have something extra, or both?
So both. We
Okay.
the vendor enables us to use redaction software, so that's for general discovery type things because it's faster. We'd use a Pro when we want to have more granular redaction or more courtroom presentation redaction.
Okay. When you share your videos with other law enforcement agencies, do you redact or you send unedited, or how do you share that information or that particular footage? Michelle,
If I'm sharing with a law enforcement agency or a law enforcement partner, that's going to be shared unredacted.
Okay.
I do have settings in the system that I use where I can click off a box where they're unable to share it. So they can view it, but they cannot then share it with someone else. And that helps me to rein everything in to make sure that nothing's getting released accidentally.
Okay, and then I want to get at this retention question. How are you overcoming retention of body-worn camera video where cases may go on for quite some time due to a variety of reasons? Examples would be FTAs or appeals where the cases can go on for years. DUIs, for example, drop off in our system after 2 years unless we receive a request for extended retention. How about retention, Michelle?
I'll start because it'll
Okay.
be sequential to then move to Cal and Damon.
Okay.
In my system with our retention categories that we set, That's for the evidence. There's two sides of our system, evidence and cases. As soon as I put evidence into a case to send it over to the state attorney's office, that retention is forever.
Okay.
So it's not going to get auto deleted. Any evidence that's attached to a case stays in the system, no matter what. I know that the vendor is working on updating that so that you can set retention categories on cases. We may not utilize that for these reasons, for the reasons that, you know, what if something does go on longer than the 8-year retention that I had it set for? And then I'll let Cal take it from there.
So because of these exact reasons, we actually keep everything indefinitely. You know, we're very fortunate that we have 2 vendors, and our vendors have both agreed to not charge us for using their platforms. So we're very fortunate to be able to keep data for an indefinite amount of time. That, of course, may not be the case with other, you know, prosecuting authorities or different law enforcement partners for sure. But, you know, that our office took a position that in the future, if we ever needed it, we want to make sure we have access to it, whether it's 5 years from now or 50 years from now.
Okay, Damon?
It echoes what they do. I'm sure that we have one common vendor for at least this, but once evidence is shown, and that's why I would encourage law enforcement. So even if you have a different retention schedule, if you share it with your law enforcement prosecution partner, it's their responsibility to retain it. And how they do and what they do depends upon the volume and the size of the department. Some DA's offices are small, they have small agencies. They may just store disks or thumb drives in the case file. With the volume of, you know, the number of cases we get, we can't do that. We're storing it on the vendor platform. We have unlimited storage once it comes to us, and it's for, at this point, it's for forever. We'll see. That may change, who knows, but that's what we're relying on for that.
Okay. We have time for one last question, and it just popped up on our local public defenders are bypassing discovery and FOIAing all video evidence in a case. Are you running into similar issues? If so, how are you handling them? Cal, I see you smiling.
I think Michelle can handle this question great. She's got a lot of questions on DUI. We had a lot of issues with DUIs where defense attorneys were submitting FOIAs to Fort Lauderdale for DUIs. And so our public defenders, they get everything through the discovery process, and private defense attorneys as well. But they typically want to get the body camera video or dash cam video or whatever it may be for DUI more expeditiously for, you know, in Florida, we have FLHSMV hearings in order to have their client apply for a hardship license, and the magistrate's going to want to see the video, or you kind of want the video to be reviewed prior to going to that. So Michelle will touch on that briefly, and I know that they're not doing it. They're not sending it out.
I do have one attorney. He requires it to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and he's required to pay for that, just like he would any other public records request before I'm able to produce that. Because I have a subpoena, I do produce it, but they are required to pay up front. One thing I did want to touch with public records and retention, anytime I do release something as a public record, I do tag it with an additional retention category. I just named it public records request, so that that video does not get deleted out of my system. I don't ever want to release something to the public that I don't have a copy of myself. So everything is retained indefinitely once I've released it as a public record.
Just to clarify real quick, I'm sorry. When Michelle said that she does release videos for the administrative hearings for the Department of Motor Vehicles, that's as long as discovery has been done. If discovery has been done by statute, I mean, nothing can be released until the state attorney's office has released discovery to the defense attorney in this case. So a lot of times the law enforcement partners, I know sheriff's office gets it a lot. They won't respond. They'll say, hey, look, you know, we can't provide body worn camera for this because discovery hasn't gone out yet. Please contact your state attorney and get it through the discovery process. So try to circumvent the discovery process just to get their client a hardship license. So we do have that occurring here.
Okay. Okay. Carrie, I'm going to turn it back over to you. We're out of time. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate your participation. I think the information you provided was terrific, and thank you. Go ahead, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you all so much. We sincerely appreciate it. I think, you know, today was kind of dubbed as advancing your body worn camera program, but this conversation I think is so relevant to agencies at any point in their body worn camera program. You know, we hear why we recommend strongly recommend agencies involve their criminal justice partners from the very beginning. You know, these implications of workload and staff and public release of video and legislation, there are so many things agencies need to consider that, you know, go beyond what the police department, the police agency might have to do. So I think this is just such an excellent conversation, and I appreciate all of your input on it.